Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we discuss why Mars was abandoned by the Imperium. A spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from the Warhammer 40k Horus Heresy story, Cybernetica, by author Rob Sanders. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first, without spoilers, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself. But with that said, let's waste no time and just jump straight in. Now, the relationship between the technically two separate powers of the Imperium and Mechanicum has always been a bit of a balancing act. Yeah, for sure, in the current era of 40k, the term Imperium really kind of sums it all up. The two thrown together. The Fabricator General always a High Lord of Terror, for example. However, we have to remember, they aren't. The Treaty of Olympus signed by the Emperor guaranteed the Adeptus Mechanicus as they are now, the Mechanicum as it was then, their sovereignty, that their forge worlds would forever remain their own, in return for their service and resources. And so it was the two became forever intertwined, but still technically apart. And to say there's been a few ups and downs along the way, most certainly wouldn't be an understatement. Possibly the most stunning event ever revealed, being during the War of the Beast, when it came out the then Fabricator General of Mars was experimenting with Orc teleportation technology. And he was actually fully intending to teleport Mars away from the solar system, leaving Terra alone to face the Orc tide. An absolutely unbelievable development in truth. The Adeptus Mechanicus fully intending to abandon the throne world, the Golden Throne, the Emperor, to save itself. Heresy. However, the reality is, it could certainly be argued the Imperium has abandoned the Mechanicus before, Terra abandoning Mars. And this was within the Horus Heresy. With the War Masters announced rebellion, the conflict would reach every corner of the galaxy as we know, and Mars, the principal forge world, was no exception, breaking into rebellion and civil war, as the Fabricator General Kelbor Howe sided with the War Master, known as the Schism of Mars. The fighting was tough and intense, with loyal factions valiantly remaining loyal to the Emperor, despite being vastly outnumbered, and 4 companies of the Imperial Fist Legion arriving from Terra. However, ultimately the retreat would be ordered, and the Imperium would abandon the Red Planet, blockading it for the rest of the heresy. And it's within the Horus Heresy story Cybernetica, with a conversation between Rogal Dorn, Malcador, and the new loyal Fabricator General Kane, that we get a great glimpse of why Rogal, acting commander of the Imperium, decided to abandon Mars, chief forge world of the galaxy, to the enemy. Well, you know my thinking on this, Lord Malcador, Kane told the Sigillite. The situation on Mars has been intolerable for some time now. I think Lord Dorn agrees with you, Fabricator General. Then why did he allow his legionaries to abandon the forge world principle to the enemy? The Martian asked, his optics searing from the darkness of his hood. Rogal Dorn slowed and turned, his armoured form like a wall of adamantium. Simple, General Kane, the Primarch said, his voice resembling the splinting of rock. Supply and demand. You are familiar with the concept, I trust. Now my lord mocks the very principles on which the Martian-Terran Concord historically exists. Then you understand, Dorn continued. bulldozing his way through the Mechanicum overlord's indignity, that the forces of the Legiones Astartes are already stretched, that war of an unprecedented scale sweeps through the galaxy, converging, intensifying, growing in its power to decimate and annihilate, intent on sating itself, as all wars do, on the innocent and the unprepared. Dorn looked to the sun, rising above the walls, citadels and bastions of the transforming palace. Every one of my Imperial fists will be needed to stand before such a ravenous monster, throughout the solar system, across Terra, on the walls of this very palace. I thought not to waste such a precious resource in holding a handful of forged temples against the mighty and collective constructs of all Mars. Supply and demand, Fabricator General. Now, this is a conversation between the three most powerful people within the Imperium at this time. You could certainly argue. Rogal has had to take command of the Imperium's defense, in absence of his father. Malcador is of course eternally the Emperor's voice, in every way. And Kane leads the Mechanicum, though admittedly it's as divided as the Imperium at this time. Yet you can immediately feel the tension, Kane feeling mocked by Rogal. And you have to say, even for Rogal's renowned bluntness, it does feel like he's being particularly rude to the new Fabricator General here. And sure, it's probably a conversation Rogal's fed up with having, but Kane fought to defend Mars from the betraying Kelbor Howe. He fought to remain loyal to the Emperor, when his ruler and so many were not. It would have been far easier for him to not resist, to go along with it, but he didn't. He fought and led the resistance. So he deserves a bit more respect here, in my opinion. Rogal taking that treaty between them perhaps a bit too lightly, and especially so considering the situation. And he point blank says to Kane's face here, I won't waste men defending what's not important. Waste resources. And that's a huge slap in the face to all of those who remained loyal within the Mechanicum to me. Sure, Mars most likely would have fallen regardless, but to say so bluntly, in that way, even for Rogal, is harsh here. Essentially telling him Mars was abandoned because it wasn't worth the effort. I mean, how well do you think that would go down if the roles were reversed? That it was the Fabricator General telling Rogal, we abandoned Terra because it wasn't worth our resources to save it. I mean, there'd be hell to pay. An uproar. The ultimate heresy. And that's the same kind of indignity Rogal is delivering to Kane here. Mars is the very centre of their religion, of their empire. And so a bit more tact in the way it was handled would probably have gone a long way. But as it is, you can feel it getting worse as a result. Supply and demand, the Fabricator General repeated, back to the Primarch. Is that why you came for your armour and munitions? I can hardly be expected to fight such a war without them. What about these citizen constructs of Mars, my lord? Kane shot back at him. What about the lives of the priests, artisans, and temple thralls who laboured to forge your weapons and equipment? You demonstrate a surprising amount of passion for a subject of the machine god, Dorn said. The right to life is the same, the Fabricator General said, whether your wondrous workings hang on bone or a construct chassis. Now, my lord, If you please, what about the lives of my people? Dorn looked to the Sigillite, who gave him the unreadable look of a man unwilling to answer to, or judge the impossible choices of another. They died so that their fine works might reach hands that would turn such craft into instruments of avenging death. Rogal Dorn told Kane finally, warriors who would use such wonders to bring justice to the fallen and punish those who had truly condemned Martian innocence to a disposable fate. So, not only did the Imperium abandon Mars to its fate, but they made sure to grab as many resources as they could in the process. I mean, it really rubs salt into the wound here. And if you were brand new to the lore and didn't know who these characters were, or if I remove the names here, you have to admit Rogal sounds far more like the Heartless Machine than the Fabricator General does. But again, it just reveals that difference in priority. Rogal caring only for the throne world, and Kane caring for his throne world, Mars. His people left behind. And it's quite telling, Rogal glances to Malcador, the unspoken appeal of, are you going to give me a hand here? Because of course the Primarchs are used to Malcador making the decisions, being the authority. Whenever Malcador spoke, the Emperor spoke. And you can see, or at least feel, Rogal wanting Malcador to step in. But he doesn't, because it's Rogal who is in command of the Imperium's defence. And Malcador knows that Rogal is far better suited for that role. If he deems Mars to have to be abandoned, well then unfortunately it has to be. Even if privately Malcador disagreed, which he actually did, wanting Mars to be reclaimed. And Kane raises that very prospect, mentioning the continued arrival of allies in system, even other Primarchs too. But again, Rogal simply shuts it down. And though he agrees the blockade of Mars couldn't go on, his solution, however, was far more drastic. You are right about the situation on Mars being intolerable, Rogal Dorn admitted. The blockade of Mars cannot go on. I need those vessels and the legionaries that crew them elsewhere. Malcador assures me that there is loyal resistance on Mars, a guerrilla war if you will, yet there is little evidence of it. The Red Planet has been taken by the enemy. We have lost Mars, and we must accept that. It's time to consider other options, Fabricator General. In the past, when worlds have been so thoroughly infested with Xeno, for example, when an expeditionary action to retake lost ground has been deemed too costly in life and material, we have looked to other solutions. Drastic solutions to impossible problems. Now wait a second, Zagreus Kane blurted, the blue blaze of his optics intensifying. Malcador, he can't be serious. When has Rogal ever been known to not be serious, Fabricator General? The Sigillite returned. You are talking about Exterminatus, Kane said. On the Forge World principle. On Mars. That is what I am proposing, Fabricator General, Dorn told him. I have run the simulations with my captains. Such action is the best tactical resolution to a host of problems faced by Terra and the solar system at large. With your assistance, we have already negotiated with the Forge World's Phaeton and Voss Prime for supplies. Much needed vessels and manpower could be redirected from the Martian conflict to securing the capital system. However, most significant of all is if all else fails and Horus arrives in system, then we will have stripped him not only of his Mechanicum allies, but also of a highly fortified staging point. Consider, Fabricator General, how costly in time and life to remove the traitors from Mars now. Then imagine how impossible it would be with Horus Lupercal and his traitor legions operating out of the Red Planet. You understand that I cannot allow that to happen. So Rogal Dorn was literally going to destroy the Red Planet, to destroy Mars. We talk of the Allegiance, the Treaty of Olympus, even the dubious actions and self-interest of the Adeptus Mechanicus in the future. Yet here, the Imperium was legitimately going to wipe out the second most important planet in the galaxy, the seat and power of the Mechanicum. It speaks to the desperation of the heresy, the lengths they would go to win, but also their hypocrisy in the outcries at Mars's later self-interest. And it all really shows just how fragile the Allegiance and Treaty is, from its very inception to the current day 40k era. Because Kane would argue against it, of course, speaking of the loss of ancient technology and all kinds of wonders, the Imperium's very future. And when that would fall on deaf ears with Rogal, he would ask him if he'd considered the reaction from the remaining loyal Mechanicum people, those here on Terra, and those still loyal Forge Worlds across the galaxy. And it's a threat. There's no two ways about it. It's a threat. Within the Imperial Palace itself, no less. A subtle way of saying, you do that, and you lose all the support from us that you've ever had. And of course Rogal is about to go ballistic, knowing a threat when he sees one, and it coming within the palace itself no less. Until Malcador finally stepped in to resolve the situation in another way. But again, it all shows that precariousness, the fragileness of it all that the entire Imperium is built on. How that self-interest at the very core is a completely dividing issue. I guess the human nature of self-preservation at the root of both of those empires. And it all goes to show how over the history of the Imperium Mechanicus alliance, both sides have come perilously close to shattering that allegiance forever. And the Imperium is just as bad as the Adeptus Mechanicus. But as always everyone, what do you think? Are you surprised that the Imperium not only considered Exterminatus upon the principal Forge World, but that it was basically going to happen? That it took an implied threat of losing all Mechanicum support to stop it? Do you feel that that threat was fair, considering the support the loyal Mechanicum followers had given, fighting against their own Fabricator General? Or do you think Kane maybe crossed the line? That one conversation could have ended it all, right then and there? And considering these issues between the empires have happened several times throughout history, do you think it's inevitable that the empires will fracture at some point? Or do you feel that somehow, some way, they will always resolve the issue? As always everyone, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too? But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.